My name is Richard Capper, and we are currently at Stocks Farm, which is in Suckley, Worcestershire.
And tell us a bit about then what it was like growing up here as a child. And
I was born in 1967 in Worcester, and as soon as I could sort of take part in the farm, I would get totally involved. So in school holidays, I would be here just amongst it all, and then when I was old enough, I'd start doing a little bit of work, be it fruit picking or tractor driving, and just getting more and more involved. And I've spent every year of my life here when I can, and I haven't been forced into it, and I love it.
so what was it in particular that you enjoyed? What kind of little memories or kind of things that stay with
Farming, I think, is just about, for me, is about the outdoors. And we are very fortunate to live in such a lovely, beautiful part of the world, and it is beautiful. And I think when you're younger, you don't necessarily appreciate that. And as I've got older, I just every day is just a pleasure to be out, and I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to look after the land and just grow apples and hops that we do here.
What age were you when you learnt to drive a tractor then?
I think I was probably 14 or 15. I can't remember, but I remember my father in an open orchard somewhere, just putting me on a very simple tractor, creeping along in first gear, and just loving it. You know.
So what kind of what do you think? What can you sort of like chart the changes that you've sort of seen from when you were growing up here as a child, how the farm is now?
The farm hasn't changed at all in size over the years. When my father bought it, it was more or less 200 acres, and today it's more or less 200 acres. The cropping has changed a bit in terms of the fruit that we grow here. Dad has probably told you we have 100 acres of hops and we've got 100 acres of fruit, broadly speaking. I remember as I was growing up, we used to grow strawberries down the alleyways of the orchards as a sort of break crop. And we used to grow cherries out in the open, and we used to grow an awful lot of plums. And so that has all disappeared over the years, because those crops, like all crops, has intensified, and we've actually just focused on doing less, but better. So we now focus on dessert fruit for the supermarkets, cider apples for the cider makers, and 100 acres of hops for the brewers. So there has been a lot of change, and it's ongoing. It doesn't just, as you look around today, we have plans going into the future of what we're going to plant in the next 4 to 5 years, because you can't sit back, and because things get older and markets change.
What do you think the kind of who do you think's kind of had a harder time of it? Would you have preferred to have been farming in your dad's time, or do you think?
I'm bound to say that my father had a much easier time than me. Joking apart, I think the challenges today, whilst our customer being the supermarkets for our fruit, they're incredibly particular, and they need to be particular. It's a very competitive market that they are working in, and we have to produce the best quality apples, for example, that we can. And if they don't reach the specification, we have no sale. And so everything we do here, being cider apples, dessert apples or hops, we try and do it as best we can. We aim to produce the highest quality and the highest volume of crop, and that's what makes the numbers work. And after all, that we are running a business, and it needs to wipe its face, so to speak.
What about the whole kind of craft beer thing? Has that impacted on you? Has that kind of has that been helpful to you? Or
the craft brewing revolution has had a huge impact recently, and it's come from the States actually. The sort of microbrewers, the craft brewers over there, they started creating artisan beers, and it's the trend is just going throughout the world at the moment. And hop growing in the UK has been in decline for some time, because we've been reliant on selling our hops to the big multinational brewers, and they can buy their hops from all over the world now. So it's a very competitive market, and they pay the lowest price, and we cannot compete. And so craft brewing, microbrewers, whatever you want to call them, they are in the market now, producing small volumes of very high quality beer, and they are using more hops, which obviously as a farmer really makes me happy. And they're also prepared to pay a little bit more, because they're more of a premium product, and that is what saved the British hop industry. And that's been going on for, I don't know, the last 10 years, I'd say. And so we are now, where the area of British hops has been in decline, we're now, it's sort of plateaued, and we're seeing a little bit of growth in the area of hops grown in this country, and that's all down to the craft brewers. So we've got a lot, we need to thank them and keep them happy, and that's what we aim to do here.
So just rewinding again, going back to in a few years, can you just tell us about sort of the transition between you and your dad? And I mean, I know he's still very involved, but was there a kind of, do you see a significant point when you became more the one sort of taking the lead on things? Or
the business, as my father and I have been partners in the business for many years, and I got married just over 10 years ago. My wife Ali, she's very involved with the farm and in agriculture as on the whole, and she is a partner too. And I think my father started to take a bit more of a back seat when we got married, I think, and we sort of put roots down here, and we made it very clear that's where we wanted to be. And Dad has been farming here all his life, and he probably won't mind missing that. He loves it. It is his life. It still is his life. He likes to be involved, but he doesn't want the hassle of the everyday menial tasks that have to happen. So Ali and we get on with that, and I do the growing of the crops, and Ali is more my spokesperson, I suppose, and gets out there and shouts about British agriculture to the wider public. And Dad just enjoys the surroundings which he has effectively created since he moved here. So.
And what do you see? Any kind of what do you think in terms of? Have you got children? Do you see
I have
them?
a stepson, Paddy, who's 14. I've got Serena, who is my daughter, who is 10. And I haven't put any pressure on them to get into farming at the moment. In actual fact, Ali and I made a sort of we've talked about it a lot, because when I grew up, I've always wanted to farm. I was never forced into doing it. It's something I just loved doing, but I would never force my son or my daughter into it. So I'll give them opportunity to work elsewhere, because I think they can spread their wings.
Are they showing any signs of being?
To be honest, not yet, and I wouldn't expect them to. Paddy, when he's a bit older, he might do, but he loves his sport, so he focuses on sport. Serena, she's only 10, she has a pony, and pony's little girl's best friends, really. So not yet. So it would be nice to think one day that be taken over and carry on. But at the moment, Ali and I are just very happy running it together. So.
How have things changed in terms of kind of the workforce and things since you've been here? When you were a child, what is your kind of like memory of the people who came and worked here?
When I was growing up, our permanent labour, our permanent employees, there were many more of them, as I remember. There was less mechanisation, although we're on a farm which a lot of the work is still done by hand, but we try every year to mechanise things as much as we can, make life easier, make the job easier for people, and that inevitably means reducing labour, which is not always the best thing. But again, as I said earlier, we're running a business, it's all about costs, so we have to try and keep costs to a minimum. And so our permanent labour force has reduced. And as a child, our picking labour used to come from Birmingham, the Black Country, travelling families. They come here for the summer, bring their caravans and park here, and pick the plums, pick the strawberries, the cherries, and do the hop harvest, then go back to wherever they were living. And that eventually changed. That sort of source of labour began to dry up, and then we saw Eastern Europeans, Polish mainly, coming over for work. And we have, like many farms in our sector, just rely on Eastern Europeans at the moment. So we have a lot of Polish coming over, Bulgarians, Romanians more recently, and we have a sort of a gang of hop pickers who come back. They've been coming back for nearly 25 years, the same group. They come back. Some of them are retired, having a holiday. Some of them are young, growing up with young families, just coming over for a holiday job, and they come and get on with it. And our picking gang, they also are mainly Polish, and they come in by day. And but we're seeing more Bulgarians and Romanians. So it's always on the change, really. And I don't know if Dad said anything about it. We're a bit concerned going into the future what the implication is with Brexit and how we will actually get labour, because all our apples for the supermarkets have to be picked individually by hand. The cider apples can be picked by machine. That's not such a labour-intensive tasks. And the hop picking gang, that's a team of 14, so it's not a big number, but we do need people to do it, and we find it quite difficult to employ anybody locally. There's nobody around who wants to do it.
So have you had any conversations with those people who've been coming back for years about what they think the future might be for them?
I do. I mean, on a regular basis. There's a team here at the moment, 8 of them, who've been here since just after Christmas. They've been pruning for us. They've been stringing the hops, they've been tying the hops, and they're now in the orchards doing orchard work. So they've been busy. And they are concerned going forward, and I think they've been coming here for a long time, as I just said, and they do want to still come, and they're not sure if they're still welcome. So there's a lot of mixed messages in the press and on the news about who can and who can't. But so I try and reassure them that no decisions have been made yet, and I try and just encourage them just to keep going back. So hopefully that will, long may that continue, and the government will see sense and have some sort of scheme to bring in plenty of Eastern Europeans, call them what you like, but plenty of people to help us.
So I'm just a bit interested in when in the summers when there was sort of suddenly an influx of people and people coming from the travellers come in and people from Birmingham and stuff. What was that like as a child? Was it quite exotic? Were you not allowed, but did you kind of interact, or was it kind of like a bit like, oh, there's a strange...
I think for my own experience was the initial experience. They all had these very flashy caravans, very shiny, sparkly caravans, and obviously large families and quite scary looking families, if I'm honest. And as a young child growing up, I sort of was a bit timid, didn't want to go too close, because there were a lot of them, there were gangs of them, and I'd see them in the orchards, and I'd be wandering through the orchards and also helping with the picking and what have you, and that we used to do a bit of sort of chatting, communicating then from memory, but I don't remember getting as involved with them as I do with the Polish. But obviously I'm a lot older, I'm having to manage a team, but I wasn't in those days. So yeah, I think in a word they were quite what's the word? Scary is not the word, is it? It's gone, I don't know.
Yeah, as a small child with a big gang of any
yeah, they're a bit intimidating, I suppose, possibly.
Yeah.
Large numbers of people coming in for a short space of time, come and pick the crops. But we relied on them, like we rely on our gang today.
So what's your relationship like now with the pickers? Does it get a bit social, or?
Well, you have to ask them really. It's a balance to be had, isn't there? I mean, I like to think, as I said earlier, they come back every year. I like to think we offer them a good work for a nice length of time, and we pay them well. And I do get on with them. My Polish is not very good. And every now and again we do put a party on for them, but they are of the sort of nature where all they want to do is work, and getting them to stop working is quite a challenge sometimes. So I feel very lucky. We have a very good gang, and they come back every year. They know what the job is about, which makes life a lot easier for me, George, my manager, and so life ticks on a bit easier with it.
So have you got a kind of a particular sort of memory, or just sort of something that always sticks in your mind to do with sort of either growing up here or recently? What's your kind of fondest memory? Or
my fondest memory is probably with the hops. I think when I was growing up, as a kid, when I was at school, I think hop picking, harvest of hops, has always stuck in my memory. There was just sort of the team effort of bringing the crop in, and the smell, the noises, and there's a camaraderie that goes along with a big operation, bringing in a very sort of specialised crop. And from a very young age, I really enjoyed it. And the harvest job is very, as I said, there's 14 people involved, so there are 14 different jobs, and I was lucky enough to be able to have a go at all those jobs. So I've done it all, and not necessarily particularly well, but I have a good experience of what's involved. So. Yeah, and I think the hop bines themselves, they're quite scratchy, the hop plants, and I have memories of my arms just being totally scratched to pieces, because when you're handling the crop, getting it into the machine, there's brute force.
A lot of people talk about the smell, don't they, of hops?
Yes.
What do you think particularly, it seems to evoke a lot of nostalgia in people?
It does. I mean, people today who, friends of mine who don't necessarily live around here now, we bump into each other. So I remember picking hops. So many people I bump into have had harvest work picking hops, and they'll never forget it. And I think it's that, as you say, it's that smell of the hops, the machinery, and it was just a very unique crop to pick, really.
So we're going around and talking to people and collecting stories kind of linked to this archive of photographs. What can you see a value in that? Why do you think that is an important thing to do?
I think it's very important. I think the history of hops is fascinating, and I think a lot of people don't know enough about it. And certainly with the renaissance in craft or microbrewing, I think people are becoming more attached to the beer that they drink, and I think they want to know where the hops are coming from. So the more they know of farms and the history of those farms that are growing those hops today, the better, really. So spread the word.